Hi there, it's Denise, and this is the Activated Asana podcast, where I, as a yoga teacher, invite other yoga teachers and sometimes yoga students to talk about yoga. And we all want to improve our practice. We all want to help our body age well. And, we're talking about all the things that interest us in that endeavor. Today, I have Sara with me, and she is a movement coach with a background in cross training and functional movement assessment, currently teaching yoga as well. So she has a great background, very extensive training, and has worked with rehabilitation and that kind of scenario as well. So thank you so much, Sara. What is your favorite aspect of kind of this collection of training that you've done?
Hey, Denise, thanks for inviting me. I love chatting with you about all sorts of stuff. So I want to chat with you about this too. I guess the thing that brings me a little bit of a unique perspective from other if I had just been trained in yoga, was that I started out in fitness first and then moved to the rehab to performance realm, where I did do objective evaluations where people were already in the department in pain. And from that, I had also trained the healthy soldiers, right? So I had a good perspective of the whole view, right? Because even the healthy soldiers in my fitness classes had some pain and we had to work around that, or we had to support that. But when you're in physio, there's a little bit different level of pain. And so I've seen the gamut of that, which I'm really grateful to all of my training. And when I stumbled upon yoga as well, again, there's people in all sorts of different levels in your classes asking you questions. So I think this is a great discussion to have to kind of shed some light on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yoga teachers they do just tend to be people who want to help. And, the thought for many yoga teachers, because, we have to admit that the degree of anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, and things like assessment, is very light in yoga teacher training. And so most yoga teachers feel kind of a lack of expertise and experience in that area. So what we want to do today, our topic is pain. And we're actually going to talk about pain for 3 episodes because we need to look at it from a few different perspectives if we're really going to be helpful to yoga teachers and their students. So let me tell you kind of what's up ahead. So today we're going to focus on, what pain is, what are some of the characteristics and hallmarks of pain, where is it actually, and some of the factors that contribute to pain. So we're going to talk about that. And then in the next episode, we'll talk about some of the reasons why people have pain. Again, this is going to include many factors, and how our movement habits have something to do with our pain. And we'll kind of look at a few types of things that we see in yoga quite typically. And then that's going to be a long one, it looks like. I've got lots of notes on this. And then, in episode 3, we really want to kind of create the scenario where you as a yoga teacher, maybe it's at the end of class or the beginning of class, and a student comes up to you and says, I am really struggling with this pain in my shoulder or my hip or my foot or something like that. And we want to give you sort of a thought process to decide if it's appropriate for you to help them, if you can help them, how do you help them, and maybe you need to refer them out. Okay, so this is kind of going to fill in some of those places where you might actually have some fear yourself around whether or not you're helping or hurting your students. Okay, so we'll begin with just talking about what pain is, because I think this is not all that well understood. And if we want to reduce fear, we need to understand it better. Okay,
well,
so
it's going to be different for every person that you talk to, right? So yeah. I think that's the very first thing, is that it's subjective. So that means that when you talk to person A versus person B about their same shoulder pain, you're going to hear you might hear 2 different perspectives on that right away.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And pain it's incredibly subjective, not even just from person to person, but within that person's experience.
Oh,
You know, right? Like from one day to another, or one time of life to another. Their pain experience will be subjective. So that's something we'll go into a little bit more. But you wanted to talk about this subjective pain scale versus a functional pain scale. What does that mean?
There's and so just to be clear, there's so many realms of pain, right? So in my experience, speaking from my experience and my education and how my mentors and how I personally have dealt with pain, right? Mm-hmm. But there is whole professions that it is just their job for pain. So on that scale alone, it is totally different. So I like that we're kind of honing down onto people that are in your class, probably. So they're mobile, they're doing what they're living their life, they're active, they don't have debilitating pain, right? Because they're moving on with they're doing their activities of daily life, but they might just have
and they're showing up for yoga.
Exactly. Right? They're in your class. So there's that degree too that I think we have to take into consideration as well, unless you're working in a therapy department doing yoga therapy, which is, of course, then you're going to be surrounded by professionals, right? Other modalities that might help that person. So with that being said, in the clinic, we might have had a couple pain scales, right? And the occupational therapists have their own pain scale. And so there's a few different ones. One is just a subjective scale, like on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, 0 being you have no pain and it's fine and you're not complaining about it. 10 being it's like the worst pain of your life, that kind of thing. So you can get people to be on that scale. And like you said, that scale is very subjective. It's not objective. So it's going to change depending on how they slept that night, or if they really did something to aggravate it, if they're doing it. So it's going to change. A more functional pain scale is what can you actually do? So it's more objective. So are you able to walk a lap around the gym with no foot pain, if foot pain is their complaint? Are you able to do a yoga practice reasonably well with no pain? Like that's a functional thing. Or can you absolutely not put any weight on your wrist, right? So a functional pain is more objective, where a subjective scale is more on the person's perception of pain.
Mm-hmm. And we're already touching on things that we're going to talk about a little later today. But you know, your mind, your nervous system maybe might have, you know, an idea that, oh, I can't do that. Right. And you'll be afraid to do it. But actually, if you do a functional test, you can actually do that. This is just like, no, my arm is way too sore. I can't do this. But then you're asked to do it and you go, okay, well, let me see. And you can actually do that. So it's so interesting, like how the mind and really the nervous system, I guess, is kind of a primitive part of the nervous system that is just interested in your survival and protection, not maintaining your capacity right now, right? Because you've got this pain and it's kind of excited about that. So
yeah, and it's physical discomfort. Is it distracting? It's going to interfere with your function. It's demanding your attention. It's a form of communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
I think if we kind of, I think we were talking about this earlier about kind of eliminating the fear out of that. So even when somebody does approach you, even the look on your face, like if you're like, oh, that sounds bad, like that's already going to color that information, right? If you're pulling faces, or if you're like, oh yeah, I don't know, that doesn't sound good, you know. So if we kind of
if you're scared as a teacher, then they're going to be scared too.
Totally. So we just have to remind ourselves that pain is information, it's communication, and it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's like it needs to be investigated. And I love our yogic perspective in terms of like facing these things, you know, that are going on in our experience. You know, why am I evaluating something the way I do? You know, and just kind of fearlessly facing it and looking into it. because like ultimately, there many people say the same line in different ways, but one of my favorite ways to say it is that pain is a request for change. So there's something like, it could be in the mind, it could be in the body. There is a request for change. That's why you're getting this signaling. Pain is really, as you say, a form of communication, information. It's a signal that something needs to change.
100%. So with that, I think that pain, it could be an injury, it could be a disease, and there are certain red flags for pain that I think would be out of the scope of a yoga teacher. If it's hot, red, swollen, if you feel nauseous, if you feel dizzy, if there's obviously giant swelling in the area, like that is not in the scope, and that does deserve extra care. Right.
Yeah. And maybe an expert outside of the yoga class who, to give an evaluation or have an assessment or something like that. Yeah.
100%. 100%. But it doesn't, like you were touching on, it doesn't always have to be an injury or a disease to have pain. It can be more, and there's all sorts of pain, and we can go into like spiritual pain and all that kind of stuff, but we'll stick to the other side maybe. And it can be experienced with or without damage to the tissue, basically.
Yeah. And I think that's a really key point for a yoga teacher to understand. And the cool thing about being a yoga teacher and dealing with an issue like pain is that we don't sort of naturally relegate ourselves to the physical realm. Right. It, like a physical therapist, their training would naturally lead them to, oh, this is totally a biomechanical problem. It can only be a problem in the tissue, whereas we know that the mind is very, very strong, and there's going to be other factors, right, that influence our sensitivity. So we'll get into that a little bit more later, but let's just we'll just come back right before we kind of move on from what pain is to, like, if we were to to parse it down. A physical pain, or pain that's experienced physically, like in a joint, in a tissue, here's what's happening. Chemistry in the area is tickling the receptors. They're called nociceptors, and they are sensory receptors. So they're going to send information back to the brain and spinal cord, and then the brain is going to interpret that as pain. So again, it's an electrical signal produced by chemistry. And that's why they say sometimes, again, it sounds really heartless, but it is kind of factual that pain is in the brain. It doesn't mean you're dreaming it up. It's just that's where it's being evaluated. Because, people can sever limbs or have very severe injury and no pain. I mean, the pain is usually going to set in at some point if there's a lot of damage, but, in the immediacy. So, there's, as you said, there can be pain with an injury, there can be pain, and there's not a tissue injury. So, but for whatever reason, we're getting signaling that the brain is interpreting, evaluating as pain. And then depending on our inner state, we will produce a response. I'm just going to tell a really, really quick story about my grandson, who's 7. And he was swimming in the pool, actually for a couple of days on holiday, and there were little wasps that would kind of come and drink out of the pool. And he decided he was afraid of wasps. So he would see these wasps and he'd get out of the pool, and he would get kind of freaked out trying to avoid them. He was constantly worried about being stung. And then one afternoon, so constantly, like day in, day out, he's worried about getting stung. He's in the pool and he was swimming, and he realized, he looked to see what he had brushed against, and it was a wasp. He could just feel the little body of the wasp against his arm as he was swimming. And he absolutely flipped out, literally yelling at the top of his voice, "I'm stung, I'm stung, I'm stung." And, we got him out of the pool, calmed him down. Where did you get stung? There was no sting. But his brain had, was anticipating a sting. And like he was convinced that he'd been stung. And so, like I'm just telling you, like that's a bit of an extreme example maybe, but people can, especially if they have fear of pain, or they assume that something they're about to experience is going to be painful, then they are going to be highly sensitized to any stimulus, even if or normally it would not be perceived as pain.
100%. Part of my job for when I was in the physio was the physios would help the patients and get over the acute stage and whatever treatment they needed. By the time they came to me, it was my job to basically help reassure these patients that, you might feel some discomfort, but we have to kind of move through that to get you better, because you're good. You're good. So let's move on. These exercises might feel uncomfortable, but you're okay. Like that was a lot of what I did in my job for that exact reason.
Yeah. It's so important to reassure. And I mean, if you guys take away a message from today, that's what it is. You have to help people calm down about their pain and just understand it better. And we'll talk about like messages you can give your students so that they can kind of wrap their head around what they're experiencing and they don't have to go into fear about it. Okay. So
that's not to say that they don't have inflammation, because inflammatory response is a process. And it's a process to be acknowledged and something that we can work with. I think that instead of just being like, oh, let's just shut it down, the inflammation it's trying to help the body heal.
Yeah, every time.
Yeah.
So let's just say what pain is not. So we'll just kind of get that out of the way. So pain in and of itself, guys, is not an injury or a disease. So we've said a number of times now that doesn't mean that there's tissue injury just because there's pain. And it doesn't mean that there's like some kind of disease process. In a way, like pain is more ephemeral than that. It's not really a thing unto itself. It's a subjective experience. That's what it is. And it has to do with chemistry and electricity and evaluations in the brain and past experience and all these factors. So it is complex. Okay. We're not trying to make it sound like it's super simple, but we can reduce the fear around it. So let's talk about some of the characteristics of pain. So, let's start with it can be a result, say, of an acute injury, right? Like if you fall down, you might experience pain if you strike a limb or fall on a joint or something like that. You could have pain with that, and that could have, different characteristics in terms of, what you would feel, and that would change during the healing process.
And I would dare say that we're probably in yoga class not going to see the acute injuries, right? We're going to see the
hopefully.
Other right?
Yeah, it would be rare.
It's usually not full contact yoga, right? So
yeah,
I think the injuries that you're probably most going to find is the chronic or acute on chronic, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In yoga classes.
Yeah. Yes. And they're I would say chronic, pain, discomfort. It's often something you can work through. And that's why you don't do anything about it till it gets really bad. And that is the kind of thing we see in yoga. We do see people who have, maybe a chronic movement habit. Maybe it's the way they do certain poses or something repetitively, or it could be something like it comes into the classroom with them, like their desk job or something like that, and then it gets exacerbated in class.
Exactly. I would also add that not moving can cause
injury. Yeah.
Right. So just exactly like you said, if they have a desk job and they're sitting there for 8 hours or doing something very repetitive for 8 hours, and then they're coming to yoga class and experiencing pain, they're going to be like, oh, it's the yoga. Well, if we, and we'll get to that section where what do you ask? You're going to dig and and possibly find that it's probably not this issue, but it's maybe a few steps back.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said it like that, Sarah, because it reminded me, like, one of the things I really want yoga teachers to know is that the yoga practice, because we take the body in so many different directions. I mean, in the type of classes like you and I would teach, we would. I mean, I know there are some classes where there's very little movement, but when you're taking the body in multiple directions and spirals, it illuminates things. It kind of things that emerge. Your body shows you what's been going on and where you've been neglecting your body, and you have weak areas and things like that. So, I just want to assure yoga teachers that if you're teaching a safe practice, if you understand, how to optimize joint positions, and, you're really watching your students and guiding them, they're probably still going to have things come up for them, because there's no way that they're not neglecting their body in some corner, quite likely, and that's the body will have an opportunity to show them, because you're taking the body in multiple directions and planes of movement.
Exactly.
So,
and then that's when the communication is coming, because then I think we could talk about inflammation now, and what maybe the four signs of the inflammation is, right? So it's going to be heat. So it's gonna feel hot, red, swelling, loss of function. So all of a sudden I can't take my arm above my head, or all of a sudden maybe I can't really put some weight into my wrist, right? Or you could have all of these, or you could have none of these sometimes.
Yeah. So, I mean, like one example I would point to is something like plantar fasciitis, which is a very, very common issue. But sometimes, like, say, here's classic plantar fasciitis. You don't feel it except when you get out of bed in the morning and you put your foot on the floor, and then it's like, oh my goodness. And then you'll look at your foot. It doesn't look red. It's not swollen.
Exactly.
There's no heat, but there is this pain. And, so then you kind of forget about it as you go about your day. Next morning you get up, ouch, and then next thing you know, when you're walking around during the day, you feel it. And, it tends to build, because there's something you're doing or not doing.
Because you're not listening to the request. You're not
answering the request.
Exactly.
But it is a case where those signs of inflammation that are kind of the hallmark of inflammation, they're just not really present. The only part is pain. Right. So just an example of how you can have like some signs or not that many signs at all.
That's a perfect example. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, there's also like, if there's a lot of tissue damage, then you're probably going to have all four signs for sure. And one thing, that people kind of conflate, tell me if this is your experience, Sarah. It's always been in my experience that people conflate the term inflammation with swelling.
Yes.
They think inflammation means swelling, and it doesn't necessarily. You can have swelling just from poor circulation. You know what I mean?
Inflammation can mean, if we get out of inflammation can mean excess mucus production.
Well, wouldn't that be swelling?
Well,
versus inflammation. You know what I mean?
You're not gonna think, oh, my nasal tissues are swollen and that's why they're inflamed and that's why I'm getting excess stuff, But 100%, if we're talking about more like MSK stuff, absolutely.
Yeah. And we're mostly talking about musculoskeletal injuries, but I misunderstood what you said there, Sarah. So you're talking about, like, say if you have like a cold or cold symptoms, that is also an inflammatory response.
Yeah.
And, I don't think it's too soon to say, but like the inflammatory response is the healing response. I think this is so misunderstood. People think that inflammation is like some kind of disease or something. And when you have inflammation, it's always the body trying to help you. It's always the body trying to rebuild something or restore balance to the tissues and fluids and heal. And it's a healing process. It's not a disease process. Now, I'm not saying that you you won't get inflammation with disease, but that's because your body's trying to heal. If you have a disease, your body's going to try to heal it. It's always trying to do something that is meant to be therapeutic. I know it's uncomfortable, like the chemistry that's associated with rebuilding tissue, for example, makes the tissue uncomfortable, but it's kind of a call to the body for resources. Oh, resources over here, you guys, like send me some resources. And you're going to have some chemistry that makes it uncomfortable. You're going to have chemistry that creates swelling. And the reason why you have swelling during a healing process is because healing has to take place in water with lots of water. So, that's why you have swelling, and everybody's trying to reduce swelling, right? Is like we're always interfering with the inflammatory response. And it's because we've just sort of been trained to think of the inflammation as a problem instead of, well, the inflammation is trying to affect a solution. There's a different root problem.
Well, I
it's
think
not that.
It's an overall mindset.
Yes.
Right. There's been a lot of marketing towards like, oh, just take this and just go on with your day and just kind of forget about it. Right. So
yes.
That's really like trying to just put it away in a drawer. It's uncomfortable. We don't want to deal with that. But it's really not doing us any favors. We really need to listen to it.
Yeah. And, your body is trying to go through a process.
Yeah.
So when you interfere with the process, then it can't complete the process, and the thing is like pain, something like pain that's where your body's trying to incentivize you to stop doing something that you're doing that's irritating.
Yes.
Or it's like, something's out of balance, or, you need to rest or something, right? It's like it's trying to get your attention. And so you need to pay attention. You don't need to like mask it so you can pretend it's not there.
And it's just going to keep upping.
Yes.
Upping and upping until it gets your attention, until you finally get some stuff. So I love it when people, and if you're, and I'm sure yoga teacher, we're helpers, right? We want to help. So that's why you're in front of the class teaching, because you want to help, right? So if somebody is coming up to you in just the beginning stages of pain, that's the best scenario, right? If they're just having a little tweak or a little something, or they just feel a little something, or even if you're just talking generally in a class, right? It doesn't have to be one-on-one, somebody's asking you a specific question. You can just generally bring up these topics to kind of dispel the myths that are out there. And invite that conversation so that they can nip it in the bud early. Because if we're talking about pain, you're already like 6 stages up the ladder of, oh, now we're having change in biomechanics. Now you are in pain and it's changing your function. So if we can catch it earlier down the ladder, it's going to be easier to fix. The longer that this problem has gone on, it's going to take longer to fix.
Right. And that's because now you have, wonky compensation patterns that have to be changed too, right? And sometimes, you work around something for so long that, no longer does the original cause for the compensation pattern, it's not even there anymore, but now you have this compensation pattern that's causing irritation. So, you really got to back that up. And if you as a yoga teacher can teach your students, obviously self-awareness, but self-awareness without fear, and just to have more of a curiosity about what's going on in their body and what they're feeling.
And just an introspective look.
Yeah. And if you're feeling that something is uncomfortable, is there something you can do to change that, in the moment, like in your body? So you're doing warrior pose, or you're doing a lunge pose or something. And your knee does not feel good like that. Well, try a little bit of a different position. Like in Activated Asana, we use 3 basic activations: hand to core, foot to core, and full body activation. Yeah. And that actually can optimize your joint position and stabilize through the fascial system. So it does it does kind of keep people out of those grumpy corners of their joints where they're more likely to feel it, because when a joint is more into a collapsed position, now you're aggravating tissues. So, you know, sometimes just having a better movement methodology is going to change what they experience in terms of pain. And it's, you know, the thing is, it's so important to empower students to that they can get themselves out of pain, that they can do things like it. When somebody stops doing the activities that they enjoy doing because of pain, they go downhill really, really fast. And that's because, you know, the mind is contributing to that downward slide and the tissue's getting weaker very quickly. So it's better to keep moving, modify, so that the body-wide need for movement is being met. And then, you know, you can, you know, modify for a particular joint or whatever that needs to be. But to continue like a holistic approach to movement is quite important just for healthy bodily function.
That's a really good place. I think we should introduce Greg Lehman. Do you want to talk about him and what's in your cup? Because I think this really goes into that 100%, right?
Now, like, again, I want to just remind us that like yoga teachers are open to considering other factors besides what's going on in the body, okay, as being contributors to feeling pain or not, like being sensitive to pain or not. Now, I'm not trying to diminish pain in any way here. No. If somebody's in pain, like for me, that's enough to know. I want to do, is there something I can do to help reduce their pain? And sometimes that's just reduce their fear. Sometimes it's just help them understand that their body is going through a healing response and that you need to let it heal, you know? And in the meantime, let's not upset it by doing this particular asana or technique. Let's do it this way. So you have a bit of a break for now. Again, just assuming that they're showing up for yoga and they want to do yoga. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, you know, that's us as yoga teachers, right? We're not in a headspace where it's all biomechanical, right? It's all in the tissues. You know, we know that other factors affect us, our emotions, our stresses, you know, we know that affects our perception. Right. And so we're open to that. So we don't have that barrier to get over.
That's right. So if we talk about it like how Greg Lehman talks about it, right? He talks about your cup. And if your cup is this big and you fill it with what? No, not good quality sleep, not good quality nutrition. What are some of the other things he fills the cup with before?
Well, anything could go in the cup. Like, right? Are you enjoying your life? Are you doing things you love? Are your relationships healthy? And then those are things that would go into your cup. And then things that take it away are bad sleep, bad food, poor movement practice, or no movement practice, or, you know, things like that, things that are aggravating and sort of disrespectful to the body, substance abuse, all kinds of things like that. It makes it more difficult for the body to cope with anything extraneous, right? It could be, I mean, it's harder to cope with stress in general. And then it's harder, like if you do sustain an injury or you have something chronic going on in your body, you're going to just feel it more because in general, you feel more vulnerable. There's an aspect of insecurity there when your cup isn't like being full of things you love, healthy, life affirming, you know, aspects of your life.
Things can actually make your cup bigger, right? So giving you a buffer from the pain, right? Because if your cup is already full, and then you just add one more thing, you're just going to overflow it with, and that's when the pain is going to feel. Whereas if you can make your cup bigger, you're going to have more of a tolerance level for the extra stuff in your life that could potentially cause you pain. And maybe that's another reason of why maybe some people would feel the pain and others wouldn't, or it affects us differently based on the cup analogy.
100%. And that's why like that subjective experience can, you know, changes from person to person, but also at various days, weeks, months, stages of a person's life too. It's just like how, what is that balance for them? So we're kind of used to talking about balance, in our lives in yoga. And the beautiful thing about our perspective versus a kind of a mechanistic perspective is that we're just naturally able to take all of that into consideration. And then we know, like, the practice is, especially like in activated asana, I can't speak for every yoga practice, but in our practice, we know there's like a part of the class that is for stimulating, right? It's for building, it's for challenging. And then there's another part of the class, and they're not necessarily separate. It's just this is woven into the class that is very much about reducing sympathetic nervous system firing, right? And restoring calm and a parasympathetic state, which is the state where the body can heal and adapt. So we do need stimulus, we do need challenge, but we need this other aspect as well. And that's actually very important because that is where healing takes place.
Well, and I want to say that those, I liked your point that doesn't have to be like one part of the class is going to be this, and the other part of it could be single leg standing balance. Could be both of those, right? It's a stimulus, but also if you can calm the nervous system down, have that good positive outlook, like, oh yeah, it's a little bit burny, but this is okay. Like have that conversation in the class, have that conversation with yourself, you get used to it, and that's okay.
Yeah. This concept of adaptation, I'm so passionate about, because it helps you understand everything that's going on with you from a physical to a mental, emotional, spiritual level, right? We need these little challenges. We could call them exposures, right? To working hard, to challenging ourselves, to staying with something, even up to a level of fatigue and discomfort, just to see that you can do it. You need to like prove to yourself that you have this power. And to me, like, that interoceptive experience can be woven through the entire practice. For sure. I mean, it can't be if you're just going like mad the whole time. Yeah. But if you're moving slowly with intention and you're holding and you're deeply breathing, 100%, then you're weaving that parasympathetic state throughout the practice, even while you're challenging the body. And I think that really helps us in life. This is a stimulus and a methodology that will help you in life. As you weather the storms of life, etc., you're able to go, no, I can do this. I'm efficacious. I've got this. It does give you that confidence, and that is the kind of mindset perspective that helps you deal with pain, with upset, with things not going your way or something. You always know that you're solid within yourself, and building that kind of confidence, I think, is something we can do in the yoga class. And I think this helps people manage their life, their mental, emotional, spiritual life, such that their pain sensitivity is greatly reduced. And that again is just the context of our class, the fact that there's guidance from a teacher, that there's community. All of these things are so important to human beings.
Support. And I even say in class, like, when you can see people are struggling, it's okay to struggle. And I'm like, look at you guys adapting. Like, I put a positive spin on that because it is good. And sometimes people don't have that perspective, but maybe because they haven't looked at it that way. And so I like that idea of, using the word adaptation and putting it in a positive spin. It's like when my kids are bored and they're like, oh, I'm bored. Well, that's awesome, dude. There's going to be some good things coming from that, right? So I think we can do that same thing in a supportive way to our students, with our students in class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it always just keeps coming back to helping them believe in themselves,
and their curiosity.
Yeah, curious, meeting difficulties, without fear, and just trusting themselves that they'll figure it out, that they'll know what to do. And I'm kind of all about giving them a methodology that they can kind of I won't say fall back on. It's more of like a beginning place, you know, a methodology where they can explore, they feel safe, they feel stable, and they can feel, you know, and really have that feeling experience that you can learn so much from. I honestly feel like that's why we have a body in the first place.
Absolutely.
So.
And you're always going to have those people that do need a referral. So make sure that in your community or in your space that you have kind of some names that you've vetted out, that people that are going to mesh with your style, that you can or that maybe you've seen yourself. You know, we're not just talking about students here, we're also talking about yoga teachers.
Yes.
Instructors themselves. So make sure you have kind of that list of people that you feel good referring to them about, and have that maybe communication partnership with. And then organizing, activating, modifying, experimenting, all those things can be helpful to move the person along the continuum.
Yeah. And probably by now you can feel the difference between that mindset where here's the body, it's designed to heal. It's okay to experiment. It's okay to even have pain from time to time, because it's just information. We can work with it. We can investigate it. Yeah. To this end of the spectrum where you're just like, oh my God, like I'm, you know, in pain. I'm whatever, catastrophizing. I'm not a good yogi. I did something wrong. I'm broken now. I'm, you know, I'm in for, you know, this long road of, you know, surgery or whatever, you know. It's like, no, people need to believe in their own design, you know, the design of the human.
We are amazing machines. The body is an amazing machine, and not just the body, but that whole, that holistic part of the body, mind, breath, all of it, all combined, like, pretty cool.
And we can teach that. Like as yoga teachers, we can teach people, you know, pain management strategies. Just breathing. Breathing in and of itself could be, you know, just so desensitizing in terms of like how you're experiencing something as being painful.
Oh, Denise, that's a whole other podcast.
I know. We won't go deeply into that, but just again, like our tools as yoga teacher, just being mind, body, being aware, right, of the power of the mind, and having strategies with breath, with asana, you know, and just other awareness practices. And that mindset can be so helpful to somebody who's really sensitized to pain. So I just want yoga teachers to know that in and of itself is super, super valuable. Just, you know, being approachable for your students and giving your students that message that, you know, the body's designed to heal. Just always giving them that. It's not only the student that comes up to ask you a question after class that needs to know that. Your whole class needs to know that all the time. And you need to say it over and over and over, because when they leave your class, they're going to see all kinds of ads, you know, like about their headaches and their bad joints and their bad back and stuff like that. And people buy into that stuff, and it weakens them. It doesn't help build them up. And we want to build up our students ultimately. We want to see them soar. So I think that's our overview of pain. And in our next couple of episodes, we're going to get into some specifics and look at it a little bit more closely, so you feel like you have some tools and a little bit better equipped. But for now, I think that we handled that part of the pain question.
I think that's good for that section. Let's move on to section 2.
Okay. Thanks so much, Sarah. I'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Denise. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye for now. Hi there, Denise here. I hope you enjoyed that discussion. And if so, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can see the next one. And hey, if you're interested in learning more about what I do, I invite you to my free community called the Yoga Teachers Lounge. You can join that in the link below. And hey, if you want to work more closely with me and become an Activated Asana teacher, then head over to my website and fill out an application. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you on the next video. Bye for now, everyone.